Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to Insurance Innovators panel discussion, Insurance as a Service, exploring the potential of platform-based business models, hosted in association with PA Consulting. Great to have you with us today. Now, insurance is obviously going through a major paradigm shift across industries. The drive towards digitization and platformification means that insurers need to reevaluate their role in the wider economy. They also need to think of ways to overhaul traditional business models to avoid losing their customers to faster moving competitors, new tech or big tech too. Now today our expert panel are here to unpack the untold potential of platform-based business models in insurance and to give you some valuable tips about the long-term strategic decisions that you should really be making right now to ride the tidal wave of change. Before we introduce our panel of speakers, let's ask you a few questions to set the stage straight away. Bear these all in mind throughout the webinar. You should see a set of polling questions in the feed below this video player right now. They encompass some of the key issues that you might want to think about to stay ahead of the curve. So starting with the first question, you'll see the options beneath. So pick your most important option. Don't pick more than one, pick one, even if you want to pick more. What is the most important step that insurers need to make right now to join the platform economy? That's question one. Question two, when will the window of opportunity for insurers to move to platform-based business models close? That's question two. And question three, what is the biggest threat, do you think, to incumbent insurers to successfully becoming platform-based businesses? Have a look at those right now. Let us know which of those options that you believe hold the key to success for insurers going forward. We'll get through those, we'll ask the panel those questions and look at your answers during our webinar while live today. But back to the studio and let's meet the panel. First of all, we have David Vanek. Hello, David.
Hello.
Great to have you with us. David is the co-founder and CEO of Anorak. He leads their mission to build a new model for buying life insurance that enables customers to make the best possible choices. David is a former investment banker and serial tech entrepreneur. Before co-founding Anorak, he held C-level positions at Made.com, a leading e-commerce platform that you may well have heard of. Great to have you with us today. Next up, we have Evangelos Avramakis. Hello, Evangelos.
Great to be here.
Great to have you with us. Evangelos is the head of digital ecosystems R&D at Swiss Re. He's recognized as a thought leader and advisor in the insurance industry at Swiss Re. His role focuses on forward-looking market developments, digital ecosystems, omni-channel management, and business model innovation. Great to have you with us too. Last but not least is Scott Paton. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Lindsay. Good afternoon.
Good to have you. Scott is a senior partner in PA Consulting and leads their work across the insurance industry. Over the last 25 years, he has helped clients globally to go further, faster with ingenious strategies for new products and services, developing compelling new customer experiences, transforming ways of working, bold approaches to using technology and adopting proportionate strategies for risk and compliance. That'll make you embarrassed, right? Slightly red-faced.
Wow,
what an intro. Yeah, it's true. Well, thanks to PA Consulting for supporting our webinar. We couldn't do it today without you. So over the next hour, we will be covering lots of ground and you may well have a few burning questions or comments for us. So we want to give you the opportunity to put them to our panel. Simply send them in throughout the discussion, either using the Twitter hashtag, which today is Insurance19, or via the comments section below us. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the discussion. So lots of interactivity today. We really want to hear from you. So get in touch while you're watching us live and also look at those poll questions. They may well be relevant to you. We want to hear from you and we'll go through those questions in due course. Let's get into it by unpacking what we mean when we say insurance as a service. And let's examine the rise of the platform economy across the globe. First of all, Scott, kick us off. What do we mean? What do you mean when you think about insurance as a service?
Well, insurance as a service is a fundamental shift in the insurance business model. If we look at the model as it stands right now, it's all about the insurer's world. It's the provision of a grudge purchase for me as a consumer. It's a terrible service, often a commoditized product, and often we experience a battle over who owns me as a customer. In the new world, actually it's all about me and my world and my ecosystem. It's about providing a broader set of services that fulfill my needs at key life events. And it's about doing that via an experience that's unified that's exceptional and that often joins up services that are provided by a whole bunch of providers.
It's also about catching up with what we expect in our everyday lives. David?
Yes, I mean, as you describe it, Scott, to me, that's how insurance should be. Yeah. As a newcomer to that world, I think, yes, that's exactly how it should be done, and it's been long awaited by everyone. So yes, but technology will make it happen, and is already making it happen everywhere.
You know, Evangelos, has insurance been a service before now? I mean, yes, if that product was perfect for you. Otherwise, you're kind of left there going, well, I guess I've got to buy that instead of something else that I'd prefer. What does this mean to you?
I think it's not enough when it's just offered as a service. I think there are some key differences we need to make sure. One was the angle of the customer, so what's the consumer, how he will experience that. On the other hand is how are we providing this kind of services? So it's the how, the technical aspect on how do we integrate, how do we offer this experience in a much better way. So I think it's not only about the servicing aspect, it's about the how we deliver finally to the end customer in order it feels like a kind of, in his environment where he feels, yes, this is exactly what I always want to have.
Relevance, also timeliness. So, and that's a general thing about looking at what's next. You know, what can we do to help the customer in future? That's very important, isn't it, as part of this insurance as a service, if you get it right?
I think we as an industry struggled more or less by, we defined the product value proposition, then we need to find sales channels that were able to sell it. And now the customer wants to understand why this might be important to him. And then he wants to have the choices how to make this as easy as possible to purchase that or to get the service. And I think this kind of shift is a significant one because we might need to rethink our way we're going to offer the value proposition to the end customer.
How are our customer demands changing this practically in the real world right now? What are we doing to drive the platform economy?
I think it's a really important point actually, because I think it is primarily us as consumers that are driving this. First of all, we want and expect a simplified experience within which our needs are fulfilled at key life events. So think about an example of a life event of travel. When we're booking travel arrangements now, we want to be able to book accommodation, we want to be able to book flights, we want to be able to book transfers, we want advice on inoculations, we want health cover, we want travel cover, and we want comfort that our homes and our assets are being protected while we're away. Second thing, we want more tailored services. We want things that fulfill our needs as they are now and as they're going to evolve. Think about how our approach to consumer goods and services is changing in a sharing economy and what that means about the risk profile. And I think the third thing, and this is really important, is we want to decide who we have relationships with. We don't want that forced upon us. And as a result of that, we're happy for those people to provide additional services. There's some great examples of this. Vitality, I think, is a great model where actually through the relationship they've got with customers, they're diversifying not just the health insurance, but health and well-being offerings that they're providing through other partners in the distribution chain.
Mm-hmm. David, what do you think about this? I mean, it is about value adds. It's about things that we might talk about every day in insurance, but getting it right, making it really relevant, making it understanding my lifestyle, what I need from a supplier is fundamental to all of this.
Yeah, put me as a customer back in control. And for a long time, insurance has been perceived as very opaque. Put me back in control, give me transparency, make me smarter, so that I can decide immediately if I need to do this choice or not. Yeah. And this all comes from the user experience. Yeah.
Fundamentally, Evangelos, as customers, to a certain degree, if we don't like it, we can walk. And that's also driving a lot of change. If I can change my insurer quickly and I've got lots of options, I can go to that aggregator side, no problem at all. Of course, the industry has to change to get ahead of that curve and develop a relationship that potentially has been lost.
The question is always not, do we need to maintain the relationship, or is the relationship, going towards different touch points, and then we might need to make sure that our value proposition is part of the touch points. So by changing the nature of the environment, some touchpoint might significantly change over time. So if you take your example on travel insurance, so if I book the travel, I go to South Africa, then I want to make sure that, you know, the healthy environment, so is there malaria, yes or no, and do I need to have the right coverage on that? So how do I get this information, and then do I really need to call an agent to get the cover right, or do I just purchase it on the spot? And that's the kind of thinking.
The why is always the question, you know, why should we do this, you know, but let's talk about the who. Who's doing it really well, David? Who you're seeing, you know, other platforms working in other industries, for example?
Yeah, so there are many platforms in many industries, and it's usually what we call connected marketplaces. Exist in mobility. I won't dwell on Uber, but it's making it simple to order a cab and matching in the gig economy a driver and a customer in a very simple way. It also exists in e-commerce. I mean, there are many. eBay was the first one. And then in financial services, it starts to happen. Stripe is a great example of how to make payment a platform that is easy to integrate. Amazon is doing it with credit in a very efficient way. And insurance is lagging behind, but is coming to that one. So everything we've talked about, I think, the concepts are familiar. Probably people listening to us, they've heard about them for a while, but it's how do you make it happen? What do we need to do? What do we need to build as an infrastructure to make it happen?
And is it the infrastructure that needs to be right? We'll get into much more of the detail, but as a broad headline, you know, what sort of things do you need to look at initially to become more platform-based? Is it the infrastructure? Is it a culture? Is it, you know, the way people work with customers?
So we talk about three broad elements that are really important. The first is, as you say, the customer. And that starts to touch upon really understanding customer needs at different life events in their broadest terms, not their needs from an insurance perspective, where we give the travel example. It's not just about the travel insurance. And figuring out where the insurance company is going to play in that value chain, whether they're going to have their own ecosystem and platform, whether they're going to have that and invite others to participate, or whether they're going to participate on the platforms of others. So thinking about those partnerships and channels, that's the first piece. The second piece is the technology, and technology is there as a really critical enabler. You can't really move into insurance as a service without some key technology enablers, and my colleagues will be better placed to talk about these, but within there you've got things like cloud and open APIs and data analytics and scalable infrastructure. And then the third layer, and we think at PA this is often missed, is about ways of working and transforming ways of working and breaking down those functional silos that we have right now, which are claims departments and underwriting departments, and moving towards cross-functional teams that are aligned to value and delivering value quickly. So it's those three elements that we think are really important.
And fundamentally across industries. It doesn't have to be insurance, as you say. Actually, that is the change that's being made. Culture is coming in so important. People are finally realizing that actually the people that serve those customers, who are often customers in their own right, also need to be worked out. We'll come back to that stuff. We may even repeat some of that. It's really important stuff. But let's look at the Asian market for a second, Evangelos. You know, who's doing it well in Asia, and potentially why are they doing it well?
I mean, the so-called, digital kind of native insurance companies like Ping An and Zhong An, but also other players in the field like Ant Financial, but also Tencent, they're all entering now into the insurance field. So for them, it's kind of natural to get into there from a pure digital perspective, but don't forget they have also their own agents. So it's not only about technology. Technology is enabling it, but offering all the services into their platforms, and all are entering into payment, into financial services. Insurance is part of it. So it's kind of natural that is part of it. So the glue to make this happen is already there, and that's a key difference, because the infrastructure they have it already. And we in Europe, we struggle left and right on the Western world, and we might need to get there. The other thing is the kind of collaboration and the openness to different partners, which is completely different. And the third piece is the the way they experiment. I would say the experimentation appetite to piloting is completely different and made in a different way, the way we do it here.
There's a fourth piece, which might be regulation, David.
Yeah, we talked about it. So regulation and data protection, I think it's a positive and it's a negative. So they are the opportunity to test and build a lot of new things using sometimes data that here you couldn't even access to price a product. This will obviously change. They will need to probably be a bit more stringent on regulation, but it enabled them to test, as you said, and create a lot of things that we can't have here.
Without being too Asia-specific, Scott, it's quite useful to hear what's happening in the Asian market, just in terms of taking those case studies, those ways of working, perhaps the integration, the forward-looking nature of it, that can be relevant over here as well, that potentially could make the markets potentially in the West as good, as joined up.
Yeah.
Although there's a way to go.
And we know that a lot of our customers in the West are looking to the East for inspiration. I think there's some interesting things here. Look, we're dealing with similar challenges in the markets. I think quite often things like regulation get put up as a reason for not doing anything. But I think there's so much that we can do. We're seeing a lot of our clients start to invest in some of the key enablers, particularly around the technology enablers. We're not seeing currently too many of the big established players going along the sort of shift and transformation that we're talking about. But my belief is it has to come, and it has to come not least because we've got disruptors coming into the market, and we've got some of the big players that have been testing this in the East and will now be exporting this to the West. But we're also seeing others that own relationships in different contexts, and I'm sure we'll come on to things like Tesla, that are promoting a different way of working, a different way of fulfilling customer needs, and that is going to disrupt, and everybody needs to react.
I think it's not an option, to not do anything.
Yeah.
And we are constantly talking to investors as a startup, and more we've got calls from large Asian-based investor tech companies who are really looking at companies like us as a way to enter and disrupt the industry in the UK and in Europe.
Evangelos, any thoughts too?
I mean, exactly this phenomenon is, so if you take the two giants, the tech giants like Ping An or Zhong'an, I mean, they want to offer the value proposition to other markets. So as an example, the Ping An Good Doctor, which is a kind of a great app for getting immediate access to healthcare. I mean, this app on this value proposition now exported into Grab, Southeast Asia. So it's a Chinese actually service being exported. Or on the other hand, Zhong'an is offering the end-to-end platform proposition to Grab ecosystem. So we see exactly these examples. Actually, they will touch upon here in the Western world as well. So this is going to be the kind of new normal. And the question is, how fast can it transform my organization to plug in?
It's really good. We'll get very practical in a couple of minutes' time, but let's just think about the features, perhaps of the companies, the way they work, or the technologies they're using. What are those overall key common factors, do you think, that can help me as an insurance provider start to take a more platform approach, even if it's not time for me to become a fully platform-based model?
So on one hand, I mean, both companies are offering their service as a B2B service. So this means me as an insurance company, I can access those services and plug it into my kind of small ecosystem platform environment. So I don't need to invent the wheel from scratch. Yeah. It's there. And because they have a kind of decomposed value proposition, we can pick and choose whatever service we might use. And so this changed a little bit the way we look at the value proposition, at our value proposition, because not everything we need to invent by ourselves, so we can get access to these services. And I think this is something that is really, really changing.
David.
So technology for an insurance company in Western Europe, even in the US, is seen as a cost. It's not a strategic asset that helps me grow. It's a budget line that I need to control. And if you look at it that way, you can never match what's happening in terms of innovation. So currently, what's an open platform for an insurance company is to issue a price digitally to a customer and potentially a PDF, which is my policy. And that's the status of innovation, of this connected world where I feed a price comparison website and then people buy. So there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of investment that needs to flow through to make the infrastructure right. to do exactly what you described.
You have to think about use cases, you have to justify the cost, but if you think about cost, it's always been the case. If you think about cost first, then potentially you're going to stop because it's too risky.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of part of the mindset shift that's needed, and perhaps part of the mindset that is more present in the East than perhaps some of our clients in the West. I think we're seeing investment in some of the underlying capabilities enablers, and as I mentioned, most insurance companies are doing things with microservices and cloud and even open APIs. But what we're seeing is they're using that to really optimize what they currently do, and optimize the customer journeys they currently have, and make the push of the products a little bit better, rather than saying, how could we do things comprehensively in a different way, which touches in all sorts of things, including culture and reward and performance management, that I'm sure we'll come on to as well.
It's a very large ship to turn around. I mean, there's no doubt. But will the UK, do you think, David, ever catch up and become, potentially the leader, jump out in front in a unique way that makes us the most exciting market to be in?
Yeah.
It could be a no.
I have to say yes. No? Yeah. There is no escape door, like Brexit. So I don't think anyone has a choice. The customer is ready. I think the customer is begging for something different. So either they do it or someone will do it for them. And I think we've seen the large insurance companies very aware now of it, trying to change things. But you need to think about your teams as factions, where you combine a lot of skills, different skills, to shift the proposition. Yeah. Yes, they will. How long will it take? And will be the other be faster? I don't know.
You may have seen an unwarranted use of the word Brexit in that last section. We apologise for it already. That's great. Okay, so time to get really practical. Let's discuss the array of changes that need to happen right now for insurers to take advantage of this industry-wide movement. Clearly, we've heard some of that already, but first of all, let's take a look back at our live poll results. You've been kindly writing in, well, ticking your favourite box. What's the most important step, first of all, that insurers need to take now to join the platform economy? Now, this can go to Scott. So you'll get this in a second. The results are really interesting. I won't go through the whole thing, but you've been really fantastic. I'll go through. Why not? First of all, 28%. Just about the biggest, equal biggest response, investing in digital transformation and new technologies. Second, equal best at 28%, was changing culture and mindsets, which is really interesting. I mean, digital transformation does, of course, come loaded with the need for your organization to come with you. I'll go to the least subscribed to, which is kind of positive some ways, based on what we've said, controlling and reducing cost, 0%. Other, 0%, that's fine. So cost was the least relevant. The most relevant were changing culture and mindsets and investing in digital transformation. Scott, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I broadly agree with some of those views. You can't do this without the foundational layers of technology as an enabler. We've touched on a couple of times mindset and culture and beliefs and behaviours, and how that perhaps acts as a bit of a break to innovation and trying new things, or thinking about different ways about partnerships. I think this is a bit of a difficult question for people to answer, because actually I think it's a bit of many things here. So, for example, you could do brilliant things with mindset and culture and brilliant things with technology, but if you aren't thinking about the customer in a different way, then you aren't going to really build success from insurance as a service.
Right, and actually, there are many options here, so it's difficult to choose one that encompasses many options that you would choose for. But I will mention that the only question that explicitly mentioned the word customer was option 3, which was developing new customer propositions, which, as we discussed before we came in, means pushing out customer propositions, really, I suppose, rather than listening to. It doesn't give you the nuance of listening to and bringing out things, but that was 2%. Of all answers said developing new customer propositions. David, what do you think about that?
Nothing. No, what I think that is not in this list is start small, get the culture of MVP, minimum viable product, because if you make it big, immediately everyone says it's impossible, then the compliance kicks in. And it becomes very complex, so simplify your life, start small, test with a sub-segment, and learn from there.
Yeah. There are many more options here, and we will come back to them during our discussion. Let's move on. Let's get practical, Evangelos. How do you identify the opportunities that can really help you to become a more platform-based business, or the model that goes with that?
I think one of the key questions that was not mentioned before is how do I see things and the world changing? So it's to me more a kind of a strategic choice. So if we take how we will live in 10 years, how we will move, or what's our mobility behavior changing, how is it changing, how do we communicate with each other in a couple of years, we need to identify, okay, if these are the key changing components, what does it mean for the organization that provide this kind of services? And then what does it mean, because the risk does not disappear, what does it mean for insurance companies to plug in this relevant environment? So as an example, you just mentioned Uber or ride-hailing services. If this is part of urbanization and we see this more and more coming, how do we need to adapt into this new world? So if today we have the agents, the brokers that delivering the value proposition directly to the end customer, or aggregators here in the UK, and in the future, if you ride within a ride-hailing service, the insurance might be somewhere embedded, right? And the question is, how do we embed in exactly these new fields? So the bet would be how this environments will change, and how do we need to start now in order to stay relevant in the future.
Well, that's really interesting, and that's a really global view. So that's, it's a really good thing to hear. That the first thing I need to do as an organisation is to think about the world around me, the wider world, and where it might move to. At least being able to monitor and adapt myself to that it seems like a almost unlimited task. But you can start to use things like Internet of Things. You can start to look at the macro changes that are going. It could be economic, it could be political, it could be health, and so on. But actually, there was the organizational agility came in at 3% in terms of people watching us today who believe that that was the thing to change. So interestingly, the agility didn't really come up as a major question. Does that surprise you? Scott?
I'm not sure if it surprises me that that's come through in the audience response, but fundamentally I think it's a critical enabler. Mm-hmm. We work with organisations across the globe, and yes, sure, part of it's around innovating with new products and services and technology, but a big part of this is about transformation as well. And if you don't change those ways of working, if you don't break those organisational silos, if you don't introduce organisational agility and bring cross-functional groups together, just thinking about accelerating that time to value, this will fail.
Yeah. Again, distribution, investing in new partnerships, came in at 8%. So again, that wider view in terms of the way you work, what you offer, but also who you work with. That distribution network is very important.
There is who you work with, and insurance has always been distributed by partners. I mean, most of the time, so it doesn't really change. But what do you enable them to do with technology? Can I let let's take travel, for example. Can I let the travel agent, the digital one, create his own product of the back of my underwriting engine, so that he sticks the product exactly where he wants in the journey? So there are some startups like Setu who are doing it perfectly. So you delegate to your partner the capacity to shape a product that is needed and relevant in the customer journey.
Yeah. Fundamentally, very briefly actually, Scott, how does doing this, you have a use case, maybe a cost use case, it may be in terms of how agile we are or not, depending on your poll answer. But customer relationship.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways that this really enhances customer relationship. First of all, if I'm providing a broader set of services at key life events, then I'm going to build a deeper relationship, deeper levels of trust. Secondly, by taking a bigger part in my life and working with others who also take a part in my life, the insurance company will get more data and insights about me, which will enable them to tailor services and experiences that are most relevant for me. But there is an interesting angle as well here with insurance as a service, and that is, quite simply, there are some things that an insurance company could choose to do that would really add value, but perhaps don't enhance the customer relationship. What would be an example of this? We've seen the announcement from Tesla, for example, where it's clear it's going to be about their platform, they're going to take ownership of the customer, and that means that from insurance companies' point of view, they're not, whilst there's a partnership still there, it's a very different one, and the insurance company could choose to say, okay, our role is going to be to provide a microservice, an underwriting microservice that adds real value to that customer experience. But you know what, the customer might not even know we're there.
Yeah. It's a big question. I mean, one thing I like to think about insurance of the future being is reassurance. advisory, trusted advisory. That allows me then to, and as an insurer, I'm in a perfect position effectively to say, hey, this might help you. That's a way to bring my lifestyle as a customer into my service with you. It makes me a marketplace. Is that not true? What do you think?
Yeah,
about
it
this
is true,
question?
but to do it efficiently, to do it in a very omni-channel way, you need technology that can have my profile as a customer, and when I speak to the agent or when I'm doing my thing online, it doesn't break, so I'm still the same person. I don't need to go through a questionnaire for 30 minutes again.
Yeah.
And this guy tried to sell me exactly what I didn't want to buy.
Yeah.
There's this connected world where I am someone for different parties involved in the same journey. Is exactly what we said. We need to invent those journeys, and the platformization of insurance allows to do it.
David, great question for you. I love this question. It's impossible to answer. What technology should I invest in right now?
Right now, many.
Many.
No,
Is that a brand name?
I think first you need to recognize that technology, as we said, is not a sunk cost and a maintenance cost for your old beast. Then you need to know how to use machine learning, but you need data for that. You need to be embracing UX and UI, and you also need to deeply link analytics to how you shape your proposition. Yeah. So you don't push proposition, but you build them with data that you have. So it's usually all organizations would claim that they have those skills to some level. Yeah. I can assure you that the way they use it is very different from one organization to another.
I think we'll have to leave legacy systems at the door for the moment. Yeah, that's another big conversation. Evangelos, AI. What relevance and importance does AI, machine learning, and so on play?
I mean, David just mentioned it.
Yeah.
I mean, at its core, I mean, if you get access to more data, no matter whether it's the internal one or the external one or social media, whatever, if you have access to that, you need to aggregate them or at least get a kind of an indexing thing. So could be a microservice where we get the information from. That's also fine. But in the very end, you need to recompose it and to understand what are the kind of key insights. And this is something we as an industry need to learn, because we were slightly strong in, let's say, in claiming, some claim services. This is where we're strong. Distribution, that was also more difficult because you have so many distribution channels, so good luck on that. Omnichannel is even more challenging, I would say. And now we get into the platform business where the data is coming from a completely different angle. So how to integrate, how to derive the right insights is already challenging with our existing mindset and environment. In the future, this will be part of the core. Yeah. Because we will shape the products, we will shape the underwriting, we will shape the claimings around exactly that asset. So this means data-driven organization, and we as an insurance industry are data-driven, our product proposition is data-driven, but we don't behave that way, not yet.
So Ping An in China is a technology company that happens to do insurance. That's the way they define themselves. Yeah. They've got 400 data scientists creating machine learning-based model to supply the service to the tech team and then to the product teams.
It's really interesting. And we have our second poll in. Thank you very much for writing to us and choosing your favourites. Slightly easier this time. We had 5 options rather than 9. The question was, when will the window of opportunity for insurers to move to platform-based business models close? How long have you got? Here are the answers. Option 1, less than 1 year, 7%. That's number 3 on the list. No, so 7%, yes. Number 2 was 1 to 2 years, and that was 35%. You think you've got a couple of years. 39%, our highest proportion of your answers, was 3 to 5 years. 5 to 10 years, 4%. Never, 15%. I love that. 15, the strength in your answer was great. But let's talk about 3 to 5 years. Look, Evangelos, isn't it easy to say in 5 years' time we'll be fine?
I think it depends on the lines of business. So if we think about e-commerce, so if you don't plug into this e-commerce, you're not relevant anymore. I mean that happened already. The same with travel, which is very easy to explain. The next one is mobility. So we just discussed the ride-hailing environment, and by offering different kind of transport models, I mean this will just increase. So I would say in life and health that might be the more difficult thing to crack, but it's coming just because of the availability of data. But in P&C, I would consider that it happens faster than we think, and especially if you really observe the environment, how it's changing, how fast is it changing, how people live within cities. I mean, this is the way how to look at it.
It's very important though, isn't it? We ask a poll question like this and we get really interesting answers. I will ask about never in a second, but we get really interesting answers, and but of course it has to be right for you as a business. And actually I quite like the idea that people would answer it very differently in those 5 options, including never, because actually at the moment we've evaluated it right now, either we can't or we just don't think that's right for our customers. Scott, is that right in principle, even to say we're not going to do this?
I think there's probably many organisations out there that at the moment the executives might be sceptical of how quickly, how significantly this will make an impact on their business. I'd be surprised though if the reality will be this will never happen. The developments that we're seeing right now will stop. There's just so much investment going on in this way of working, in this technology, in the idea of platforms. You mentioned Ping An. I think they're investing, last I saw, 1% of their revenues every year in improving that already brilliant technology platform. Week on week, we're seeing announcements like the Tesla type announcements that are starting to disrupt and disintermediate. So I can't think of a business model where the answer never is appropriate, but maybe there is a niche
Probably
there.
what the Kodak guys were saying a while ago, never. Yeah.
And Blockbuster, bless. Okay, right, we are about 10 minutes away from your questions, so please do keep in sending them in, either through the webpage or on Twitter using the hashtag today Insurance19. Lots of interactivity, as I say, but really great to hear from you so far. Before we do hear from you and your questions, let's lay down the groundwork for success and reveal some of the long-term strategic decisions that insurers like you could be making if they want to win in the platform economy. But first of all, let's talk about the next poll. They're coming in thick and fast. The final one, I'll ask you first of all, David. The question was, what is the biggest threat to incumbent insurers successfully becoming platform-based businesses? What are the biggest threats? The options were other insurers or competitors, banks, startups, big tech like Google, Amazon, and so on, other specialist companies in the ecosystem such as car companies or people who are known in that particular area of business. So, not a great surprise possibly. I'll go from bottom to up. Startups, 2%. Banks, 4%. Other insurers or competitors, 8%, interestingly. Other specialists in those lines of work, maybe not necessarily in insurance, 31%, which is quite high. Big tech, 54%. The big tech people, of course, they come out as a big threat, whether or not we know what the threat will actually be. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's right. It's right, but I'm not sure what you do with this information. It's a threat. It will come from where it can and where it should. And as a company, you just need to get going as a carrier or as a distributor.
Well, the question is, you know, what can I do about it? Always going to be what can I do about it, if anything?
I think you need to be connected to ecosystems, so you need to have the capacity to connect to ecosystem. So you need to platform your business. It's a no-brainer. I mean, we can discuss it, but how people should have been locked in a cave for quite a while to not realize that API, microservices, the capacity to engineer a service that is customer first is what needs to be done. Yeah. Google, Facebook, Amazon are great at doing it. I don't think they want to do it. I don't think Google wants to do insurance. I don't think Facebook wants to do insurance. They're ready to suck your marketing budget to help you sell more. Yeah. So there is an opportunity to do it, connect to those ecosystems, but you really need to get it done.
Interestingly, other insurers or competitors came in at 8%, and other specialist companies, people within that business, came in at 31%. So between the two of those, that's 39%. That's quite a lot. Companies in the ecosystem or competitors, and that's a wide word. I suppose that's where to look, isn't it? You know, the people around you, the people who could just go straight in.
It's others that could secure the customer relationship and own the platform. I mean, I think, look, I actually think when it comes to the question about big tech, I think actually this is a real opportunity and it's an enabler. I do think there's a lot of misconception about Google and their role in insurance. They're already in the insurance value chain. You know, they're in distribution, but the others are providing access and reach that insurers don't have, and it's about thinking about A, where they play in that ecosystem, and B, what are the ecosystems and platforms relationships they can own? And there's many out there.
Yeah. Let's talk about disintermediation for a minute. Disintermediation. Evangelos, how do you stop being cut off from your customer base? This is all part of the same conversation, really. People can, of course, come in, but insurance has always been a slow-moving ship. Therefore, is that really a risk? I mean, how can you start to use the technology to stop that disintermediation?
To me, again, some touch points would naturally change because the environment will change, and then it will be very hard for insurance companies to own the relationship for this particular kind of risk, I would say. So disintermediation, yes, this will happen. And if I go back to the early question, some platforms, and the majority of them, they have in their nature, in their core, is financial services. So all of them, no matter whether it's now gig economy, whether it is the Amazons, the e-commerce, mobility, all of them have financial service and insurance as in their core. So it's going to be very natural that you need to be relevant in order to offer them something. But this will not happen to all of the touch points. So there will be still some relation with direct insurance. So this will not disappear. But sometimes you might need to give your touch points away because the other touch point is naturally more integrated into that.
David, what do you think? Because you're right there. You're forging, and so you depend on people moving away from traditional incumbents and start to use your services as well as working with the insurers. There's so much, what's your take on it?
What people forget as well is that insurance companies provide a great service, so they know how to price a risk. If they continue to grind data the right way, they will continue to excel at doing this, and people trust them. People don't like them, but when something happens and someone needs to pay the claim, usually they pay it. So, and this is a great asset. It's been forged for hundreds of years. And leveraging that with a bit of technology innovation and being able to connect will make them secure. So I don't think they are at risk yet. They are at risk if they don't embrace those challenges, but I think they provide a great value, which, if they don't do anything, will be commoditized because the touch point will be owned by others, or not shared at least. But if they embrace the change, I think they have a great way to thrive in that world.
And from a technological point of view, if everything in my customer journey is working seamlessly with all the new providers, the great interfaces, all those things, my lifestyle listened to, and then it gets to an incumbent insurer and goes clunk. Well, that's not going to work. So you have to be at least with the market, if not ahead of this. But there's a question, I guess, here, and it's always that it's the same thing as what technology should I buy? Should I plug in, or should I own the platform? Should I create bespoke platforms?
I don't think it's either or. I think, as we've discussed, there's various scenarios and various positions that insurers can play in. There will be examples, such as the Tesla example, where actually this is about their platform. I'm going to plug in, and the thing that I need to do is create those microservices, whether they're underwriting or something else, and make that play. But there are equally opportunities for insurers to own platforms. I touched on Vitality. I think that's a great example, but there are others. For example, workplace platforms. They've been pretty dull, to be honest, over the years. Sort of a website giving you information on benefits and life and pensions. I think there's a recognition now that actually what they give is a community of customers and a platform through which different services, different experiences can be provided, requiring collaboration with others. I can see that as being an example of a space and a platform that the insurer owns.
We all have clients and friends and colleagues who use these systems, and it's not even the system you have that has to work, but it's what you put on it. Yeah. That's the stuff. David, what do you think?
I fully agree on the employee benefit. I think for home insurance, you can create an ecosystem with connected device, prevention, rather than just paying claims, so becoming a real partner to your client. So I think there are areas where they can own the ecosystem, and there are some areas where they need to be connected to third-party ecosystems.
Yeah.
I mean, the big change is here that you need to decompose actually the value proposition. And you might struggle technically because you don't have the infrastructure to get it right? And then you need to recompose it for each partner you might have, either for yourself, but for the others. And this kind of plug and play game, you mentioned the microservice, this is new to us, right? We have, glued everything together. Now we need to decompose it to offer it as a microservice. And this is a kind of investment, but if we don't do it, we won't be able to exactly plug in our services in order to stay relevant.
And this is what Asian companies have done. They have atomized an insurance product into contract and software that can be recomputing the policies and the risk altogether in different way to serve different channels and purposes. So I completely agree with that.
You can still write into us. The hashtag, Twitter hashtag today is Insurance19. While you're watching us here, right till the end of the webinar live, and also you can get in touch on our webpage here. So please do. Questions are coming through. You've been so interactive so far. We'll get to that in a second. But just before we do move on to audience questions, top thoughts, and you've already mentioned them, but top thoughts on what I should do next to become more platformified, and that word doesn't come easy.
So at the risk of repeating myself, I think it really is those three things. Get out and figure out exactly what role you want to play in your customers' lives. And as I said before, this isn't as simple as what are your needs for this type of product. It is what are your needs in these type of environments or at these life events. What does that mean for my position? Actually, the point you were making about segmenting the value chain, I think that's really important from a technology perspective. But also, if you're the person figuring out the proposition and the partnership, that's new to you. You're thinking about so there's that. Secondly, the technology, as we discussed, get that technology right, get those enablers, and then thirdly, changes the ways of working, and do that in a think big, start small, scale fast way. So you're probably taking a slice of each of those. Either for different segments or journeys or whatever it might be.
It's covered a lot, but Evangelos, any thought? You mentioned that global view, being flexible enough to take in the global view in the future.
Where I'm not sure is whether we can act fast enough. And I'm not sure whether the insurance companies can really transform the way internally. Because, if you're used to work in that way and to govern the processes the way for the last 50, 100 years, I don't know how long, but this means that the significant transformation shifts are so big that I'm not sure that many companies will be able to do that. Rather than, that might be another approach, to start the business from scratch outside of the organization, right? And this is something, how to do that. We are not used as an industry to do something, risk-averse environment, and then we take some risk. We let people play in the garage, and so that's new field for us, right? But I'm saying not all the companies might be successful doing that internally.
So, just to be clear, your idea would be, you've got to evaluate what your business does well. You have to evaluate what you can do well, but you have, again, testing, making sure that you can at least provide a garage-based, a tag-on-based insurtech or something like that. These things are important. You have to investigate, even if you don't follow that route. Is that what you're saying?
Try. As I think, if you offer a kind of car insurance proposition, try to disrupt that one first, and try to do that internally, and see how easy it is. And it won't be that easy because all the governance is around the existing value proposition and the customers and sales channels you have. So this means you won't be successful there. So you need to do it in a different way. Yeah. And now when you go into platform business, platform economy, this is completely different the way you did it before. Yeah. So that's even adds on top of that. So this is why I'm a little bit more conservative in the successful rates, how to be so transformative.
David?
Yeah, I think it's impossible to create disruptive innovation within the main boat. So you need to create a fast ship outside and empower the team to be very, very, very forward-thinking. This can work, and that's what AXA has done with us. They've given us money to experiment something outside the system. That's what Lemonade is doing, and that's what Starling Bank is doing, creating a full-stack bank with probably very little resources compared to this world of banking, but they are doing it so successfully that just to your point, it's very complicated to do it internally. You need to create something outside, protected, to be able to disrupt.
Just one other thought on this. it would be wrong for us to leave an impression that the only way you can do this is if you aren't an established incumbent, you don't have the legacy and challenges, because the bulk of the market, that's what the bulk of the market is. Certainly what we see, we've helped clients adapt and adopt new platform strategies. What we've done is we've taken a part of their business, we've looked at a particular space, a particular environment, and developed a platform strategy and used that as a proving ground, and then extended it out. And that's an effective way of doing it. We have seen some organisations invest in things like garages and those sorts of things. The trick then is, how do you integrate it back into the business, and how do you do it for the long term?
Yeah. Brief thoughts. That makes a lot of sense, right? Feeding it back in, knowing what you can do. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure that this is important. I mean, I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
Perhaps the other organizations that might be successful because they do things differently might survive in a way and be more profitable. That the reintegration is to be questioned.
It wouldn't be an insurance discussion if it was as easy as it is to talk about it. But we have to move on. Just to remind you that in the very first poll that you got in touch with us on, the top answers on the steps you can take now were investing in digital transformation and new technology, and they were changing culture and mindsets. And I think mindsets comes through as very clear as behind a lot of that, the change in the future, because without that, you will not become less risk averse or perhaps more aware of your surroundings so that you can move on. But let's move to your questions. It's been a genuinely insightful discussion, fast-paced so far, thanks to your input, but we're not done. It's now time to hear from you and your questions. Thanks for sending them in throughout the webinar so far on Twitter and the webpage. We'll get to them in just 1 second. Before we do, please, if you can, take a very brief moment to rate today's discussion so far. A poll question, another one, should be appearing on your feed just about now. Your response is really, of course, confidential, but extremely useful. So thanks very much for doing that. Okay, question time. Some questions here to my screen, questions on my screen here. Let's get through a few of them if we can. Hannah from Ecclesiastical Insurance. Hello, Hannah. You ask us, do you foresee a time when insurance will move to a pay-as-you-use style service as opposed to ongoing cover? It's a really interesting one. You know, when you think about platform use, you might think, well, that's maybe the way to go. I've just used that for a travel insurance. Very handy indeed. Any thoughts, Scott? Briefly, we'll go around, yeah.
So the short answer is yes, and I think it's starting to happen. I don't think it'll be some time before we see it happening at scale. But the reality is, I go back to one of my early answers, that things are moving. The way that we consume goods and services is changing, and there are times when we need to switch things on and switch things off. Our risk profile changes and adapts, and we need the cover and the products and services that we've got to adapt accordingly. So short answer is yes. I believe it's happening, but it will take a while for that to scale.
Yeah, and it really depends on the importance, the value, the integratedness of the insurance cover that you need, if it's every day and so on. It goes without saying you'd go for a longer cover. Evangelos, any thoughts on pay-as-you-go?
Sure. I mean, think about if we would need to insure a Uber drive to the airport. How would we do that classically? We will take all the claims we had in the history and try to come up with a model. But in the future, you might get access to the car manufacturer data, to the driver data, to who is in the car. You got all the information, weather data, and everything around. You can price just exactly on the spot the drive to the airport. So this will mean real-time information exchange, real-time risk modeling, everything around that. This is not happening now, but if you think about supply chain, this might go exactly in this direction, and the other will be even more real-time oriented. So to me, it's just a matter of time, and we see that in the area you just touched upon.
I'd like, sorry, Katakushi, the innovation I'd really like to see here in this kind of consumption-based model is this sense that as you use and do different things, your risk profile changes, and in some areas the coverage and support you need goes up. But you know what? In some other areas it will go down, and seeing that adjustment in real time would be a really innovative development, I think.
Yeah, really good, and real time again. David, any thoughts on this?
No, yes. And
yes.
no.
I love those answers. Really good. Thank you very much for that question. That's really interesting. Let's move on to another one here. Andy from Aviva. Don't have your surname, but Andy, thank you very much. How critical is the ecosystem-led approach to insurers in delivering platform-based services? Any thoughts on that one?
It's a
David, please.
very well-structured question.
Yeah. Yes.
You've got all the buzzwords.
Yeah.
It's very critical.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't operate with a distribution ecosystem if you don't platform your business. And we're seeing it in the live space, where we're trying to make it easier for people to understand what they need and what to buy. And currently the limitation is not what we build. It's to connect this world of life insurance that is probably like the travel insurance in the 80s, to make it talk to us and make us build services that are very personalized. So as long as the carriers are not able to support innovation, it will be very complex to change the game and help them improve the way they price, the way they deliver the service.
Yeah. Scott, any thoughts? You were nodding throughout that.
So I agree completely. I also think that sometimes there can be a temptation to think that, actually, do you know what, you can create that ecosystem, create those services, create those relationships that others have as a major insurance company. And I think that's a mistake. So yes, you need that ecosystem.
Well, that's really interesting, because of course, as businesses, we're all pretty jealous of our competitors when they do things really well. So of course, you want to try and find your own way of doing that, even if you talk about it differently. Of course, that's what you want to do. But actually, is there a clean slate? Is it necessary to start with a really unique identity in terms of what you do with customers?
There's a professor here in London Business School, Michael Jacobidis. He's also Greek, but anyhow.
Yes. It's very important and relevant. Yes.
And he distinguished between ecosystem with the G and ecosystem with the C.
Oh, right.
I'm saying, why? It's not about the ego. It's not about we are in the center of the customer. It's the other way around. The touch point is somewhere, and we need to make sure that we stay relevant. So the answer will be, how to identify the relevant touch points.
Yeah.
Sometimes you are relevant, sometimes you're really not.
I think that comes to a word that we haven't used is real clarity. I mean, not our feelings about what we would love to happen in the real world, and covering all those bases, actually clarity on not only what the customer wants, but how we have to be to deliver that. And that might be painful sometimes, I assume, as well. Quite painful. Another question through my screen here. Excuse me just 1 second. Here we go. Suna Bull, thank you very much, Suna, for writing into us, VP of Insurance at Barclays. Do you think that open banking will be a threat to traditional insurance models and providers? Open banking, big deal. We've only got a couple of minutes for that. Open banking, look, APIs. We talked about APIs, not much.
Yeah.
That opens, it's a wild west out there, surely.
I think, actually, I think insurance companies have some competitive advantage here. Through open banking, they get access to all of the information that banks have. Guess what? It doesn't work the other way around. The banks do not have access to the information and insight and all of that hundreds of years of history that insurance companies have. So I actually think it's a great opportunity for insurers, particularly then if you start incorporating things like the pensions dashboard and some of the models that we're seeing there. Bring all that together, I think that's quite powerful.
Very powerful. David?
We're using open banking. We are connected to Starling Bank. We use bank data to help people buy more personalized solutions. So it's a great opportunity. The problem is banks see it as a threat. And I think that's why open banking is not going fast enough. So if bank could acknowledge that it's good for building innovative services, then I think insurance sector and other sectors would be able to build very smart and use.
But one thing that another industry might have that as yet insurers may not have, on the whole, is that relationship. And banks do have that relationship.
I mean, so the European Commission has forced actually the European banks to open up by PSD2. The question is why this approach should not happen to all of the industries in order to think about how to provide a service that the customer will say, oh wow, that's really great. And then you get access to information where the customer wants to share the information. So perhaps we might go into this direction, and then the question would be, okay, how to understand the customer and to deliver a value proposition that's really valued. Yeah. So this is still a long way to go. For the time being, open banking is just open banking, but I see many more opportunities for us, but also for other partners.
Yeah. Scott, final thought, really brief, is when you listen to all of this, we've got a lot of information. We've had a lot of input. Thank you very much for giving us that. Do you have high hopes that the reception, the appetite for this change to a platform economy, which essentially is a nimble, fast, informed type of insurance, we're going in the right direction?
I have high hopes. I think that at the moment there are some struggles that major insurance companies are going through, and that's probably curtailing and restricting the investments that are being made. But I have high hopes.
Very good. Hopeful final word. I'm afraid that's all that we have time for today. I do hope that you've enjoyed the last hour, that you've found the insights from our panel, many of them as they've been, very useful, and that you feel better prepared to join this exciting next phase of insurance. Well, thanks for sending in your questions and your poll answers. Sorry we couldn't get to everything today, but if you do have a couple of minutes before you do leave us, please fill in the poll, which should be appearing on the discussion feed now. Give us your fuller feedback. We really value your opinion, clearly, so let us know what you thought of today's discussion. That'd be fantastic. And if you enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to hear more, please join us at Insurance Innovators Flagship Summit event on the 13th and 14th of November this year in London. The event features a dazzling speaker lineup, including the Chief Operating Officer of Ping An Group, who you've heard about many times, and the Chief Executive Officer of Zurich UK. A link with more information about the tickets and the agenda will appear on your feed now, so stay with us. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next event, our next webinar. Until then, all the best. Thank you for watching. Bye.